Her mother forced her to pose for Playboy when she was only 9 years old. At 12, she made her film debut playing the role of a prostitute. Eventually, she was only sought out to exploit her innocence and sensuality, limiting her to roles that reinforced that image. Frustrated by the lack of opportunities, she ended up shooting a film with explicit scenes. And since everyone around her only saw her as an object, a producer ended up doing the unthinkable to her. In spite of everything, she was considered the most beautiful woman of her time, whose dazzling light captivated anyone who looked at her and surrounded herself with the most important people. But inside, she carried the weight and frustration of only being seen as an erotic object. The woman I am talking about is Brooke Shields, born in May 1965 in New York. Her parents met when they were very young, at the height of their careers. Her father was an entrepreneur, while her mother, Terry, was an independent woman with a promising future as an actress and model, something that would mark her destiny. The problem is that Terry's brilliant future is destroyed when she becomes pregnant by her partner, so Terry must get married and abandon her career. When Brooke is born, her mother sees in her a gold mine due to the extraordinary beauty that the girl shows since she was a child. She only has to wait until she grows up to launch her into the world of modeling. Her father is opposed to her daughter becoming a source of income, so Terry decides to divorce him. This separation plunges mother and daughter into a precarious economic situation, full of difficulties. So the first chance she gets, Terry takes Brooke to her first photo shoot for a soap campaign, marking the beginning of her precocious career as a model. Knowing the medium better than anyone else, Terry uses all her contacts to get her daughter more advertising campaigns. Thus began a constant flow of jobs in show business, all aimed at generating money and fame, always under her mother's strict guidance. Terry decides to move to a new city in search of new opportunities. Thanks to Brooke's work as a model and her mother's relentless management as an agent, they manage to improve their economic situation. To give you an idea, at the age of 10, the girl had already starred in commercials for shampoo, bandages, toothpaste, and fabric softener, in addition to small film roles and countless photo shoots. The problem was that this early success was built on the foundations of a lost childhood. It is also important to note that Terry's participation in Brooke's work always went beyond being a simple representative. She taught her everything she needed to succeed, from studied poses to how to move in front of the cameras, being just a child. The cruelest thing was that, sometimes, these demands reached painful extremes, like that shampoo commercial where a rope scratched her waist until it left marks. Her mother knew this and did not stop the filming, but still encouraged her to do it, by which time she was beginning to develop a dangerous relationship with alcohol. Faced with so much exhaustion and pain, there were times when the girl dreamed of abandoning everything, but her mother, astutely, manipulated her will with calculated promises. If we get this contract, we can move to a better house. While Terry was weaving these illusions, Brooke's fame grew exponentially. Inevitably, the great photographers and film directors soon recognized in her a huge potential. With her blonde hair, her blue eyes, and her slender figure that fit the beauty standards of the time. Thus, in a cruel twist of fate, Brooke was transformed before the eyes of the world, from tender child to object of desire. Her photo shoots evolved from innocent portraits to images loaded with sensuality, each pose, each look carefully calculated to whet the appetite of an adult male audience. Here comes the strongest part of this story. In one of those many photo shoots, a photographer had a twisted idea with the girl. She was forced to pose nude, with a premature sensuality and unbecoming of her age. At the time, as Brooke was still unknown, the images passed without major repercussions, but those photographs, like ghosts from the past, would reappear years later to shake the foundations of her life. When she turned 11, her growing fame propelled her towards the cinema, making a leap that would mark a turning point in her career and in her destiny, because a renowned French filmmaker offered her a leading role in Pretty Baby. The film tells the story of Violet, a girl who grows up working as a prostitute in New Orleans in the early 20th century. For those who don't know it, Pretty Baby is a raw drama that portrays life in the red light district, where the protagonist, born in a brothel, must navigate an adult world that exploits her innocence from infancy. The director, Louis Malle, filmed this controversial story as a denunciation of the premature sexualization of girls in society. However, in a cruel paradox, Brooke ended up being exploited in the same way as her character in the film, a pattern that would be repeated throughout her life. A key moment was the shooting of the most controversial scenes, particularly that forced kiss with an adult actor. Years later, Brooke would confess in interviews the fear and discomfort she felt during that take. Her inexperience was evident. Every time her lips brushed the man's, her nose would involuntarily pucker, betraying the discomfort of a child. And of course, she was going to do it. since we remember that she had never kissed anyone because she is only 11 years old. The girl with her heart in her throat tries to hide her discomfort while the director takes advantage of every genuine expression of nervousness, knowing that this controversial film would bring him both money and prestige. Capturing emotions as raw as a forced first kiss was a stroke of cinematic luck. Brooke was a diamond in the rough, unique in her vulnerability. And so, in the eyes of the industry, she ceased to be a child and became an object of experimentation. The fact that Brooke lives these experiences on a film set with many people much older than her, little by little, Brooke adopts a mask of complacency, eager to win the approval of those who control her career. Every forced smile on set, every awkward scene accepted without complaint, reinforces this character that she now plays in real life as well. But the price is high. Her true identity fades under the layers of other people's expectations, especially those of her mother. During the filming, she does get directly involved in the scenes, where Brooke appears advising and even watching that the promise to take care of her delicate scenes is fulfilled. But not even on the film set, the place where she should have been most protected, she found refuge, as alcohol became her mother's shadow, a monster that grew every night. Terry would come home in a hurricane of drunken rage, and Brooke learned to hide in closets or under stairs. The irony was cruel. The same woman who threw her to the wolves of the industry not only failed to protect her from the outside world, but transformed her home into the most dangerous place of all. After the premiere of Pretty Baby, Brooke surprises the world with a maturity unbefitting her age. In every interview, she defends her role, as if she were a veteran diplomat instead of a child. While the media questions her for participating in a film that many label as child exploitation, she insists that it is art. But behind those perfect answers, one senses the invisible script of her mother, Terry, whose complicity in her daughter's sexualization is beginning to be pointed out. The cameras capture what Brooke still can't verbalize, that she was turned into a product before she understood what that meant. Yet she always ends up comparing Brooke to a living work of art that should be exhibited without restraint. For her, there were no morals worth more than success. Pretty Baby became a phenomenon, catapulting her daughter to stardom. Overnight, the girl's face appeared in magazines, on billboards and screens. Accolades rained down along with autographs, interviews, and red carpets. Brooke, not even out of her teens, was already one of the most coveted celebrities at the time, and also the most exposed. During this period, Brooke enters the inner circle of the big stars, finally fulfilling her mother's golden dream of making her a celebrity. She continues modeling and accumulating roles in films of discreet success, which, although they do not consecrate her, give her valuable experience. However, everything changes at the age of 15. With The Blue Lagoon, a film that will mark a turning point in her career. This is about two young people who, after surviving a shipwreck, are stranded on a deserted island paradise. Abandoned, the young protagonists must learn to survive with no other guide than their instincts. They discover not only how to light a fire or fish, but also how to navigate their first desires. The irony is palpable. While Brooke Shields lived in real life her own accelerated transition to adulthood, on screen, she played a girl going through that same journey. The Blue Lagoon becomes, against all odds, a runaway success, and resonates especially among teenagers of the time, becoming a kind of wonderful fantasy that everyone wants to be part of. With the release of The Blue Lagoon, Brooke's body and intimacy become, once again, the subject of public debate. In every interview, they demand details about her sex life. The paradox is cruel. While the world reduces her to a symbol of sexual awakening, the constant pressure and the lascivious gaze of the media end up disconnecting her from her own sexuality. But no one taught her to reconcile with a body that everyone treated as public territory. So she simply avoids the subject, while Brooke suffers in silence the constant criticisms and judgments that question her talent and legitimacy as an actress. To many, Brooke was not a talented actress or a resilient young woman, but just a pretty face that had gotten lucky. No one seemed to value the sacrifices hidden behind her smile, such as lost childhood nights. However, that same superficial fame led her, at the tender age of 16, to an unexpected milestone. Calvin Klein chose her as the exclusive image for the launch of its new jeans. Brooke was thrilled to accept the opportunity, a photo shoot mixing fashion and acting, two of her great passions. However, the initial enthusiasm dims when the ads flood the streets and television. There she appears, barely 16 years old, wearing tight Calvin Klein jeans under the controversial slogan, "Do you know what's between me and Miss Calvin?" Nothing. Unleashing a storm of criticism and debate about sexualization in advertising and the impact of such campaigns on the public perception of youth. Despite the initial controversy, the campaign becomes a resounding success. Brooke inspires a generation of girls who yearn to emulate her look. Fame opens golden doors for her. Invitations to TV shows, contracts, magazine covers, and exclusive parties. However, among so much brightness, there is a darkness that no one sees. All this ascent happens without a safety net, since her mother, despite being happy with the fruits of her efforts, continues to drink uncontrollably. The roles she plays and the advertising campaigns in which she participates end up pigeonholing her in an image that is far from her true self. Brooke has ceased to be a person to become a mere sensual product, an object that everyone wants to take advantage of. She is reduced to being simply the pretty girl. And fate was about to deal her the hardest blow. A phone call that both she and her mother would receive, which threatened to completely destroy the fragile world they had built. A photographer very close to them tells them that he is about to publish some very compromising photos for Brooke. Remember when, at 9 years old, her mother dragged her to countless photo shoots to earn money? Among them, there was one that should never have existed, a controversial editorial for Playboy, where Brooke was forced to pose nude. The concept sought to contrast two facets of childhood, innocence versus premature sensuality. Remember that this happened 50 years ago, so morals were somewhat different back then. At the time, the photographs were published in Playboy Press, a high school magazine promoting new models, but went unnoticed. Now, however, with Brooke at the height of her fame at age 16, they resurface like a ghost from the past. The same photographer who took them years ago seeks to sell them, trying to capitalize on their image. Terry, her mother, explodes with fury because it threatens the success she has worked so hard to build, and she doesn't want it to ruin her daughter's reputation or devastate her emotionally. So she files a lawsuit in hopes of preventing the images from being sold. Once again, Brooke struggles not to be reduced to a mere sex symbol, but her efforts prove futile. The scandal erupts again, and the situation once again at the center of the media storm. This time, however, the situation is even more devastating. She and her mother lose their case, which allows the photographs to be published. It is no longer only the media that looks at her with a sexualized lens. Now the public also begins to see her that way, which is about to cause one of the worst things that can happen to a woman. Later, Brooke is presented with a new opportunity to act in the movies. However, the role once again revolves around the only subject that seemed to interest everyone: the sexual awakening of a young girl. The film, titled Endless Love, includes an explicit scene depicting the character's first intimate experience. But for Brooke, that scene represents a huge challenge, since in her personal life, she has never experienced something similar. The most disturbing thing about all this is that in order to achieve more genuine expressions, the director provokes her physical pain so that her face would show pleasure. Due to the pain and discomfort that shooting that scene caused her, Brooke's mind began to disconnect from her body. She saw herself as if she were in the third person, observing herself from the outside. This experience, known as dissociation, is a defense mechanism that human beings can activate in traumatic or extremely stressful situations, allowing them to take emotional distance from the moment experienced. In the case of Brooke Shields, dissociation occurs during a painful and uncomfortable scene, which suggests that her mind resorted to this defense to make the situation more tolerable. Beyond the obvious psychological damage that these experiences cause to Brooke, an even greater problem is still perpetuated. The industry reduces her to a sexual object from which only seeks to profit. If she does not participate in other types of roles, it is not for lack of talent or desire, but because no producer offers her different opportunities. She is only considered for roles that exploit an image that has been imposed on her. As time goes by, Brooke grows, and her need to socialize also grows. This is why she decides to attend college. She also decides to do it as a way to distance herself from the problems that having an alcoholic mother implies, but also with the firm purpose of showing the world that she is much more than just a pretty face. At first, the road is not easy. Everyone has a distorted image of her. That burden causes many of her classmates to choose to walk away, leaving her in deep loneliness. For a moment, Brooke considers dropping out of school, but finally finds in her mother an unexpected support, who encourages her to go ahead and finish her studies. From this act, the relationship between the two improves over time. Little by little, Brooke begins to find her place in college. She enrolls in the musical comedy workshop, and it is there that she finally forms genuine and lasting friendships. For the first time, she feels valued for who she really is, not for the image others have constructed of her. When she finally holds her diploma in her hands, she feels confident, full of hope and new plans for the future. With that impulse, she decides to return to Hollywood, ready to resume her career. However, when she arrives, she is met with a cold and distant reception, a rejection she did not expect. The doors that once opened easily are now closed. The same industry that once exploited her childish image now turns its back on her. Brooke is 23 years old, and to them, she is no longer an object of desire. New young women have taken the place that was once thrust upon her. In the wake of this harsh rejection, Brooke finds herself embroiled in controversy. One of the most notorious arises from her friendship with Michael Jackson. The media distorts their relationship and turns it into a source of false rumors and fabricated gossip, all in an attempt to profit at the expense of her name, creating a non-existent romance that Brooke struggles to control. In an attempt to deny the rumors of a romance, Brooke makes the mistake of publicly revealing that she is already in a romantic relationship. However, this confession only makes matters worse. Under constant media scrutiny, the relationship deteriorates and ends soon after. Once again, the impact of public commentary on her personal life becomes evident. It is in this period when Brooke hits rock bottom, facing one of the darkest and loneliest moments of her existence. Time after unsuccessfully trying to return to the world of acting, a man approaches her with potential projects for her acting career. But before showing her the proposal, he invites her to dinner. The evening culminates in a hotel room, where Brooke finds herself vulnerable in front of a man who, like the industry, only perceives her as an erotic object. She catches a glimpse of danger, but it is too late to escape. The man advances without her consent, taking advantage of his position of power to subdue her. Brooke is paralyzed, trapped between fear, surprise, helplessness, and a deep sense of betrayal, only to suffer silence while feeling how a part of her soul dies in this tragic abuse, an experience that left an indelible mark on her life. And this is where I stop to ask a fundamental question. Is her mother responsible for all the pain Brooke has gone through? If we review the facts, it was she who introduced her daughter to the world of entertainment when Brooke was barely a child, without even understanding what was going on. It was also her mother who took her to the controversial Playboy magazine photographer, and who, on more than one occasion, left her alone for hours on film sets. To what extent was it negligence, ambition, or simply a blindness fed by the system? To resolve this doubt, it is important to consider the social context of the time. Both grew up in a deeply sexist society, where opportunities for women were scarce, and, for the most part, limited to the domestic sphere. Faced with this panorama, many were forced to look for alternative ways to survive and generate income, modeling being one of the few options that offered economic independence, albeit at a high cost. It should not be forgotten that, in her early days, Terry resorted to this path in search of a better life after her divorce. For her, this world was the known, the familiar, and in a way, what she considered normal. It is evident that she never saw any problem in her daughter entering the industry. Unfortunately, Terry never managed to see clearly the real dangers that this path also represented for her daughter. This is by no means meant to absolve you of responsibility. The intention is simply to provide a broader context so that you can form your own opinion. What do you think? I'll read you in the comments. Already in his adult stage, Brooke finds in comedy and college theater an escape valve, a space to channel the accumulated tensions of both his personal life and his professional career. His great talent in comedy opens new doors, allowing him to explore facets of his personality that the film industry never appreciated, awakening laughter and genuine applause in others. Brooke rediscovers his love for acting, but this time under his own rules. This new path opens the door to an exciting opportunity. She participates in an episode of the iconic series, Friends. The most valuable thing is that her performance is warmly received by the public. For the first time in a long time, it seems that the hypersexualized image that the media built throughout her life begins, little by little, to fade. Brooke's popularity as a comedy actress grows, and with it her influence as a public figure. She begins to be invited to universities and events to share her story, talking about the challenging path from being a youth icon to becoming a respected actress. In the midst of this new stage, Brooke experiences one of the most transformative experiences of her life, the birth of her first daughter. The arrival of her baby brings her immense joy, but also confronts her with one of her toughest battles: postpartum depression. This stage becomes one of the most complex periods of her existence, marked by isolation, confusion, and a deep sense of hopelessness that tests her identity as a mother and her outlook on life. However, with courage, Brooke decides to break the silence and speak publicly about her experience, illuminating with her voice what many women are still silent about. Her honesty brings comfort to other mothers in familiar situations. Brooke becomes an active voice for change, transforming herself into an activist committed to maternal mental health. She helps other mothers going through similar situations and works to destigmatize a reality that has long been silenced. Over time, she published a book in which she honestly recounts her struggle with postpartum depression and her path to healing and emotional balance. Also reflected in its pages is the weight of an industry that time and again attacked her image and her mental stability. Still, Her story is now a beacon of hope for many women. Today, Brooke enjoys a stable family life with her husband and daughters, where she feels stronger than ever and has learned a great deal from what happened to her. The Brooke Shields case might seem like a dark chapter from the past, an excess from another era that we would fortunately not fall into today. Or would we? Beneath the apparent moral evolution, our society continues to perpetuate more subtle but equally harmful forms of child objectification. Exploitation has not disappeared. It has only changed disguise. In the different social networks, we suddenly see minors being objectified by their own parents in order to get likes, work, or money. And just as happened with Brooke, many of these minors do not even understand what is happening or what they are being exposed to. But perhaps the most alarming thing about all of this is that these practices continue to occur because they work, because they generate profits. And if they work, it is because there is a market willing to consume it. Behind every case, there is a society that, consciously or unconsciously, feeds this exploitation. Thus the question arises, will these practices that we are currently seeing be the same practices that in the future we will turn back with shame, like the whole Brooke Shields story? Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't have a definitive answer, but I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What I really hope with this video is to invite you to reflect, that we observe how, time and time again, history tends to repeat itself, albeit with new faces and new forms. And that, from that awareness, we can develop the ability to recognize these patterns and make more conscious decisions, not to look back with shame, but with the peace of mind of having acted responsibly.